Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to talk to you about continuous efficiency, a cloud cost management product that we released recently here at Harness. I want to give you an update on all the cool stuff that's been going on so far. We do have the chat open, so if you'd like to post any questions, we'd be happy to take them as I'm presenting. So before we get started, a quick note from our lawyers. So some of the features are forward-looking and for informational purposes only. So here's a little bit about me. I lead product for continuous efficiency and some cool new initiatives that we have coming up in the pipeline. And prior to Harness, I used to work at companies like UiPath, AppDynamics, and VMware, where my experience was in monitoring, analytics, and automation. So what are we going to be talking about today? A little bit of history and background on what motivated us to look at costs more closely. How do we sort of help balance efficiency with costs? And that's super important to us as a company that's rooted in DevOps. So we'll share a little bit about what we learned and the pivotal role that engineering can play in terms of managing your costs. We also have a few updates on all the cool features that we launched recently and what's coming up next as well. So we recently conducted a survey with SaaS companies of different sizes, and we got some really interesting results. A detailed copy of this is available on our website. But the primary drivers of cloud costs could be essentially many things. It could be growth, it could be innovation, it could be adding new products. But for the most part, we saw a very high degree of correlation between the increase in the costs and the engineers. So we tend to, as you can see here, the costs sort of increase as you add more engineers. And inefficiencies are observed typically in the range of 100 to 250 engineers, and we encountered that as a startup as well. So engineers basically play a significant role in terms of driving the costs up, and also in terms of managing the spend. For smaller organizations, typically it's the CFO, the CTO, or DevOps who might assume a very key role in terms of bringing the costs under control. And larger companies might have dedicated cloud centers of excellence or FinOps in order to manage the spend. But as you sort of look at managing the spend, the key is to understand really what is causing these costs to spike. What are some key vectors that might be affecting it? Are these costs more on the production side, or are they on the non-production side of the house? Are they mostly across costs that are shared across different teams, shared resources that might be causing different services to spike, and so on? So really understanding what is the root cause of the costs to spike is key to knowing how to bring this down. So I want to walk you through our own story in terms of how we encountered the situation at Harness and how we sort of handled and managed to bring our costs under control. So we had a very similar situation where we were experiencing rapid growth in cloud costs. Engineering did not have really all the visibility that they needed, and getting to the root cause of the spikes, getting to understand what was really causing this would typically take a lot of back and forth between the finance teams and the engineering teams. So we had access to some basic out of the box tools that we used to rely on. But to really understand the core of what was causing these spikes was something that was a bit of a black box for us. So we basically went and we built the product Continuous Efficiency to be able to address some of these challenges. And I'll walk you through how we exactly address those challenges. So we organized ourselves in terms of dealing with this to bring the cost down by over 40%. And I want to walk you through how we sort of how all the teams, including the engineering teams and the business teams, sort of got on the same page. So an important aspect of this is really visibility. We wanted 100% of our engineers to have access to the costs. So they would know exactly what their teams was responsible for, how these teams were sort of mapped to different services that they owned, what namespaces, what clusters, what applications, and what cloud resources were owned by each of these teams. So that was important. And that was also important in terms of understanding how every deployment or every provisioning of resources could cause these costs to change. So this is a combination of getting to the root cause of these cost changes, and also understanding what are some of the cost allocations is what we refer to as root cost analysis at Harness. And then once we knew what the teams were spending, picking up on specific environments, assigning a budget to teams was pretty useful in terms of keeping these costs under control. And cost changes is not a one-time thing. It's not something that you could do at upfront and just and let it be, as we noticed. There could be situations where there was expensive queries that were fired. There was situations where the transfer costs on the network side went up pretty fast. So it was also important to sort of have governance and budgeting in place in order to bring these costs under control and have them consistently within limits or within bounds. So we had to establish a regular cadence between our engineering and the business teams, and really use cost in addition to all the other important vectors like performance, quality, availability, and so on, to be able to manage them and keep them under control. So since it's been about 1.5 quarters that that continuous efficiency has been in GA so far. So we've added a lot of customers since the launch who are looking to optimize cloud spend, and it's particularly important during these times as companies are looking to grow while at the same time be a little more efficient in terms of how they manage their resources. What we noticed amongst some of these customers was that on an average, before continuous efficiency, there was about 70% of that spend which was going towards waste, and it's something which really shone the light on how they could actually bring those costs under control and reduce that waste across their clusters. We've been managing about 500 clusters so far with millions of pods and tens of thousands of nodes. So one example that I want to quote is Relativity, which is a customer of ours since the beginning. And they've already managed to realize about $3 million of annualized savings. It's a very interesting story on how they did this. I do encourage you to listen to a session by Shelby and Corey, who are also presenting, and learn about how they actually managed to bring these costs down by empowering their engineering teams and have like regular and frequent conversations about costs across the teams. So now I'd like to walk you through some of the features that we launched. One of the features is about how we offer cloud cost visibility in a very granular fashion across different resources. So how can you detect costs by applications, by microservices, by environments, and then how do you sort of get these costs across these different resources without having to apply explicitly any tags, and have that tagging hygiene that most that is expected off of from most other tools perhaps. In Harness, we understand the construct of these services and how they're organized. We understand what environments you're deploying to, we understand what infrastructure they're deployed to, and so on. And we use a lot of this information, a lot of this data to automatically figure out exactly what the cost, how the cost is allocated across these different dimensions. Another key aspect to managing cloud costs is to correlate everything. So context is really everything, to know exactly why it happened and how it happened and when it happened. Whether to understand if these costs were due to a deployed service, was it due to a change in configuration, was it due to a change in the amount of memory or compute that was allocated to a Kubernetes cluster, for instance, or or if it was due to any auto-scaling event. So all these events and all this information is vital to knowing exactly what was the root cause and to track them down. So just like how in the monitoring world, you can track the user impact or slowness on a website, for instance, down to maybe a load on a server or a thread contention issue and so on. Similarly, in efficiency and costs, you would want to triage those due to specific events that might have caused that. And that's what we refer to as correlating cloud events and costs and root cost. Where we can actually show you the exact events that might have caused these spends to change, your cost to spike. Now, in addition to visibility and optimizations, we also want to help you in terms of how you can bring these costs down. What specific actions can you take in order to keep these costs under control? So we introduced recommendations very recently, and these recommendations can be applied across workloads. They can be applied across containers at the pod level, and you can really tweak your resources, the amount of compute that you allocate, the amount of memory that you allocate, depending on the nature of the workload. So if the workload is bursty in nature, then we take into account some of the seasonal patterns of this burstiness. And we make recommendations on exactly what amount of compute and memory you can allocate to your resources to be able to keep them under control. And if there's a certain amount of buffer that you can allocate to these resources, or you can be a little more strict in terms of how these are allocated for, say, your development workloads, then we take into consideration those types of inputs as well. So we launched recommendations across containers, and you can now get visibility, not just get visibility into the costs, but also get visibility into the specific actions that you can take to bring those costs under control. So the other aspect to continuously managing your costs and keeping them under control is to have cost governance. Budgeting is a key aspect towards doing that, and to be able to do it at a very granular level. So not just setting budgets at a high level at cloud accounts or across teams or across projects, but also setting budgets across specific namespaces or specific clusters or specific workloads or services is key to managing that spend and really sort of and ensuring that it doesn't really spiral out of control. So we introduced budgets as well, budgets along with alerts and notifications, which you can tie back to your email, and you can tie back to your Slack notifications and get alerted anytime the spend goes beyond a certain threshold. So a quick recap of where we are today, and you may have heard this from Jyoti as well earlier, in terms of in terms of what we have built so far. So just to quickly recap, we provide visibility across services, across namespaces, applications, workloads, and really the entire gamut of Kubernetes workloads that could be managed services across your Azure, AWS, or your GCP environments. We also provide you a mechanism to bring those costs, to identify what are some of the waste that's associated with these costs through optimizations of clusters, and what actions you can take to bring those costs down through recommendations. And we provide budgets and cost governance capabilities to be able to notify you when those costs go beyond a certain threshold. And now we're planning to extend this to provide optimizations across other resources as well, other non-cluster resources such as storage, such as network transfer, and all the other resources in the cloud that's not confined to containers or microservices, but goes well beyond that. And we are also going to provide robust dashboarding and reporting capabilities Today we have a flexible exploratory mechanism where you can sort of look through your costs across different containers, across different services, across different workloads and applications and environments and so on. But we also realized that you would want to report based off of these costs and assign these to specific teams or projects and so on. So we're going to extend these capabilities for providing robust dashboarding and reporting capabilities as well. I'm also excited to announce that we're going to be working on a project called Project Lightning, which is going to help you reduce cloud waste even further. So on one hand, it's going to help you leverage, say, spot pricing with the types of efficiencies that you can achieve with on-demand by abstracting away all of the management complexity. So you can essentially group your spot and on-demand resources and get the same level of SLAs that you would expect from an on-demand resource. So that's an area that we're investing in, and we hope to bring the costs down by about 30 to 40% by actively having these types of groupings. And on the other hand, and all of us may have experienced this at some level, like we would not have turned off the resources when they're not in use, right? And you should not even bother turning those resources off. Why can't that mechanism be automated? So we're working on a very novel approach towards addressing these challenges in terms of managing resources when they're not in use. You don't have to explicitly turn resources off. You don't have to worry about when they're allocated or who they're allocated towards. We manage those for you. And we've already been POCing this with a select few customers. We've managed to save about 60 to 80% of the costs, and the results have been really promising. So we do hope to roll these features out in GA very soon. Another feature that I want to talk about for a minute is cost views. So cost views essentially is a mechanism to do cost showback and cost chargeback across different logical constructs in your organization. So for instance, if you want to allocate resources by team, or if you want to allocate resources by a department or a BU, then you might want to group these resources based on what each of those teams are spending. For instance, you might have resources that are ordered by namespace. You might want to combine a namespace with a shared resource like an S3 bucket or an RDS instance, and really understand how much each of those teams are spending, or how much each of those departments or BUs are spending. So we're going to be launching cost views as a mechanism in which you can automatically use where you could use some of the auto tag resources along with all the other ancillary resources in the cloud to be able to achieve this sort of a grouping. And once you group these resources by any logical construct that you find meaningful, it could be a team, it could be a project, and so on, then you can apply governance, such as apply a budget to a team, or apply or basically extract anomalies, that is anomalies or any kind of cost changes that's associated with that team. So it becomes very helpful and very useful to be able to manage costs within those logical constructs. So each team that's responsible for a specific type of project or a specific group can manage their resources and not worry about everything else that's going on in the organization. So that's, I hope you've enjoyed the updates. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. If you're an existing user of Harness, then I hope you're as excited as I am with everything that we have coming up. If you're new, then I do encourage you to sign up to our website and give it a shot. Thank you.